of our event to live questions, so please think about them and place them in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from today too, so feel free to add that to the chat. I'm your host, Colita Stafford, and today we're speaking with a returning podcast guest, Google's first Chief Innovation Evangelist and author of a new book, What's Next is Now: How to Live Future Ready, Frederik Pferdt. Welcome, Frederik.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It's wonderful to have you back. And we are joined by a wonderful international audience, people joining from all around the globe today. For those of you tuning in to the Creative Confidence podcast for the first time, we're IDEO U, an online school from IDEO. We help leaders take on any challenge by putting people first. We give you the skills and confidence to support creative and collaborative teams and design strategies, products, and services rooted in unmet human needs. For today, we have a very exciting topic. So Frederik is going to go through some just very quickly, some key highlights from his book, including shaping your future through small actions today, cultivating empathy for your future self, navigating uncertainty with perpetual experimentation, and identifying your dimension X. Now, if you haven't read the book, you might not have any idea what we're talking about, and that's okay, because today is not just us talking. Frederik has designed this to be an active session. So all of us, he's going to take us through 3 of those topics and guide us in activity so that we can all try on some of these things and prepare ourselves for the future. I think it's going to be we're like, Frederik, I know you're excited for this one. I am too. So we'll see how it goes. The goal being, it's the end of 2024. We're all looking ahead to 2025. It's a good time to reflect and set yourself up for the future that you want well, I'll let Frederik get to it. Let's get into it. First, I have a warm-up question for the audience. I want everyone to take a moment to just look back on the year and reflect on your overall state of mind. It's not about reflecting on what you accomplished, but rather how you showed up. What was your presence? What's a word or phrase that describes how you were in 2024? Curious, overwhelmed? So if you don't mind, please drop that in the chat. And Frederik, I'm curious if you want to share too, and then I'm going to give your proper bio. What would you describe your overall state of being this past year, Frederik?
Great question. Yes, I think it changed probably every day. But overall, I would say I've been very active. Yes,
Mm,
in many ways. So I think active would be probably my word. Yes,
nice.
which can be combined probably with trying. So I tried a lot of things. So this active trying was basically guiding me throughout the year.
I love it. And we're getting some great things. I'm going to have you take a look at the chat. Let me give a little more context about Frederik. Frederik helped build Google's culture of innovation. He co-founded the Google Garage and pioneered Google's Creative Skills for Innovation Lab, where he trained tens of thousands of Googlers to experiment with cutting-edge ideas. He's also taught classes on innovation and creativity at Stanford University's D School for more than 10 years. You've worked with an amazing array of clients and organizations, from NASA to the United Nations, South by Southwest, the FBI, which I love hearing about, Mercedes-Benz, the International Monetary Fund, and many more. Groups like that have sought out his insights on creativity, innovation, and being ready for the future. He is the author of the award-winning book, What's Next is Now: How to Live Future Ready. So, Frederik, what are some of the themes that you're seeing
Yes,
from
so thanks so
people?
much again for putting that question out there. I really think it's the time of the year, right? December, usually when people look back into the year and think about like what's the theme that, was guiding me over these last 11 months. But also people are looking forward, right? And I think that's something we're going to dive into today as well. And I see a lot of people putting in like searching or growing, experimenting. A lot of people were challenged, even broken, right? So there's a mix of, or people feeling lost, So I think there's a mix of, these positive themes, right? But also very real themes, right? That
Yeah.
uh, allowed us to, um, just sit with our feelings, right? That came up in these big moments that we all experienced in different parts of the world. So thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Well, and you just touched on the theme of your book. You said it looks like both a blend of looking back and a bit of looking forward. So at the core of your book is the idea that we may not be able to predict our future, but we can shape our future. So can you tell us a little bit more about your book and that core message?
Yes. So for me, really, the book is about that fact that the future is not something that happens to you. It's
Mhm.
something you make happen, right? And I think it's very important as we all look for those predictions of, not just the weather, but like what will the future bring, right? I think we shouldn't ask that question, what will the future bring? We should ask ourselves, what future do I want to create? And for a lot of people, the question remains like, how do I create a better future for myself, right? And I wanted to give a couple of answers to that question, how we can actually create our own future and hopefully a better one for ourselves. So when we think about the future, we usually think about what do I want to have or accomplish,
Yeah.
right? We make those plans, right? We look at goals, we look at things we want to accomplish. But these are things that are really hard to control, right? I guess a lot of people do this, especially again, like in this time of the year, asking, what goals do I have for the next year? But when we reframe the question and instead think about, how do I want to be in the future? Our focus then shifts to something we can actually control. So it's not about that grand vision someone else creates. It's about you now. It's about
Yeah.
your values, your behaviors, and the way of thinking. And so now the future immediately starts from within. And maybe your answer is simple, right? I want to be more curious. I want to be more open, more kind, or more loving. And we saw some of these themes already in the chat, right?
Mhm.
So once you have identified that, ask yourself, what can I do today? Because the future also starts now in every choice we make in every moment. And each small action you take, whether it's listening more or asking more questions or simply doing small acts of kindness or showing your love to someone else, that moves you towards the vision that you have for your future self.
I
And
love
so
that.
this isn't about a big abstract goal that feels out of reach, right? It's about actions for your personal future and making small intentional steps towards it, starting right now. And so when you truly understand that all the choices that you're making and that are possible for you, you will realize how much power you have to influence your future. And so the future moves from this being out there and like in the far distance to the right here and the right now. And you have now the control to actually shape it.
I love that so much. I like the point too of it's not what do I want to accomplish, how do I want to be? And you have control to shape it. And one of the ways you encourage people to shape it is this idea of mind states, mindsets. And we're going to go into three of them, but can you just say a little bit more about what does it mean? What is this idea of a future ready mind state?
Yes. And I love that you already used kind of like both words, right? And funny story, when I was writing the book, right, on my computer, it always auto-corrected me when I used mind state back to mindset, right? It's
Oh,
such a
really?
powerful word that we have in our language nowadays, right? And I
Mm.
think it's very important that we start to believe that the future also starts in our mind. Um, but there's a distinction between mindset and mind state because a mindset is usually this fixed mental framework or belief system that shapes how we interpret the world, often rooted in past experiences or assumptions we have. So for me, in contrast, a mind state is a dynamic and adaptable way of being, reflecting our present awareness, our emotions, and also the readiness to act in alignment with our future that we want to create. So if that's still too abstract for you, here's an example, right? Imagine you're stuck in traffic, right? A mindset might say, this always happens to me. There's nothing I can do, so I'll just sit here and wait and complain. This is a fixed, you know, way of looking at the world, and it's focused on frustration, and it's rooted in the belief that the situation is out of your control. A mind state, however, might shift to, what can I do with this time? Maybe I'll listen to an inspiring podcast, like the podcast you're putting out into the world. So thanks for doing that. Or maybe I call someone I've been meaning to catch up with, right? So it's adaptable. It's focused on creating value in the moment and aligned with making the most of your present circumstances, I would say, to shape a better experiences. So for me, it's really important that we shift our focus on mind state, because that's dynamic, it's adaptable, and it's in your control.
I love that. The adaptable, that's an important distinction. So can you help us practice this right now, Frederik? Let's try out a few. So Frederik picked out three. There's actually six that you cover in your book, and we're going to lightly touch on three of them so we can all start to practice and bring this into our practice, our lifestyles. The first one we're going to start with is called expansive empathy. And Frederik, I'll just pass it to you. What is this? Why is it important for a future ready mind state?
Yes. So empathy is such a powerful, not just practice. It's for me, it's a way of living, right? And expansive empathy for me is about extending empathy not only to others, which is very important, but also to your future self. So empathizing with your future self encourages us to really align with our future goals and the way we want to be in the future. So there's some powerful research that Hal Hershfield from UCLA and some of my Stanford colleagues actually conducted, which is related to how you visualize or imagine your future self and how that can actually help to shift your present behaviors. So it actually has an impact on how you behave in the moment right now. So they've done some research where they basically asked Stanford students to imagine themselves in 10 years from today, right? And students reported back they can see themselves, and they see themselves, you know, maybe have some more money or like having a better car or whatever it is, right? Then they asked the students to imagine themselves in 20 years from today. And then the answers were related to like, oh, they might have a relationship with someone, they might live in a house or have a job they can visualize and so forth. But now it gets interesting when they asked the students to imagine themselves in 30 years or even 40 years out. None of the students had a very clear picture, right? It was very hazy or blurry what they described. And they continued with the research where they actually put VR headsets on the students' heads to project an image about themselves in the next 30 or 40 years and how they're going to look like. So the people could literally empathize with their future selves by looking at themselves, right, for a couple of minutes. And when they did that, they reported back that the behaviors in the right here, right now will actually change. So they reported that they will put double the amount into their retirement fund. They reported back that they will actually start eating more healthier food and, you know, living a more healthy lifestyle. So what's interesting is that as soon as you build that relationship with your future self, as Hershfield actually says, like, it's not that easy because you see your future self as somebody foreign, right? Unless you're trying to build that relationship over time. So by visualizing your future self and so forth, that really helps you to make different choices and have different behaviors in the right here, right now. So the good news is that you don't need VR headsets. You can actually just do an imagination exercise, right? Where you close your eyes and you're trying to really imagine, who will I be in the future? How do I live? Who will I be surrounded by? And so forth. And practicing that really changes the behaviors in the right here, right now, which I think is really magical.
So we're going to try that right now. So
Yes, please.
this won't do justice. We're only going to take about 2 minutes. We'll switch back, not yet. This I'm going to do a 2-minute meditation to help us imagine our future selves 20 years from now. And so we're going to try this out. So if you're in your car, don't close your eyes. But if you're anywhere else, I recommend close your eyes and just take a moment. This comes from our Power of Purpose course. And it's just going to be a quick meditation to imagine yourself 20 years from now. And then Frederik and I have a couple questions. We're going to ask you what came up for you. Yeah, we'll get there. All right. Close your eyes, lean back in your chair, relax, and take a few deep breaths. Now, I want you to start picturing yourself from above, looking down at yourself in your chair in whatever room you're in. Now begin to zoom out a little bit. See yourself from the top of the room. Pull back further. See the building, see the street. Keep pulling back. Now you see your city or your town. Pull back even further, and now you see your country, your continent. You see the entire planet. Imagine slowly spinning beneath you, and then the planet starts to spin faster and faster. And it speeds up as it's going, the years spin by, and it speeds up time. And now it's going to start to slow down again and come to a rest. And we're 20 years in the future. Now, I want you to begin to zoom in toward the Earth and find yourself somewhere in the world. Where are you 20 years from now? Imagine it's a Thursday morning. What do you look like? Have the years worn on your face the joys and worries of a life well lived? What are you wearing? What are you working on? What are the challenges you are joyfully pursuing? Now, I want you to imagine yourself in a home, in your living room. Look around. What photos do you see? What friendships stand out? What are the relics of a life well lived? Spend a few moments looking around your home and take notice of what's around you. Now, I want you to zoom back out of your home, out of the future, and back into this city and this room and the chair that you're sitting in right now. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And then we're going to reflect on what you saw for yourself. So, Frederik, I'm going to invite you back in. And you did take time to do this. And I know it's not nearly enough time, but hold that vision of your future self. So, Frederik, what came up for you? And help guide us. How does this help guide our present?
Yes, thank you so much, Ko, for guiding us through this powerful exercise, right? And even a couple of minutes, it's such a great reminder that spending time in your future, right, and trying to imagine and strengthen that muscle of imagining is so powerful,
Yes.
right? And we should do that more often. So thank you, Ko, for doing that. So what came up for me was a couple of things. I think definitely I saw myself, aged, right? Wrinkles and gray hair, and like I think I'm wearing like one of those onesie suits, right? That hopefully can regulate your temperature and whatever it is that we always see in those futuristic movies, right? So that's probably what I'm wearing. I'm wearing the color black. That's what I saw too. But I also saw myself surrounded by laughter and deep conversations with friends and family, right? There were photos of hikes I've taken, maybe with my kids. I saw a bookshelf filled with a couple of books that I actually have written, which was great, and a small garden. I saw a garden as well that was just outside a window that where I experimented with some plants and growing some stuff as well. So what struck me was really how clear the future felt
Huh.
when I gave it space, right, to come into focus. And it reminded me that again, the future isn't something distant. It's built right here in our mind. And it can start with our thoughts and ideas about that future.
Love that. So you have a framework, a simple fill in the blank sentence that I'm going to ask you to do, Frederik, and we're going to ask everyone to do for themselves as well. So you have that future vision of yourself. Let's attach it to the present. What did you learn about yourself that would influence the actions and ways of being you want to be now? So this framework is simply, as I think about my future self or this sentence, I want to be more quality or behavior and less quality or behavior. So, like Frederik, you mentioned the books on your shelf, the garden, what you're wearing. So, take that. What does that mean for your present? How would you answer this sentence? And I encourage everyone else to do it for themselves as well and share in the chat if you're open to it.
Yes, thanks, Co. I think the other piece that, came up was that I've been surrounded by laughter and deep conversations with friends and family. So for me, I want to be more present in the relationships that matter most, right? That's something I wanna focus on, and less maybe preoccupied with the noise of things that pull me away from that focus, right? So, um, and those might be the two things. Yeah, I want to be more and less. So yeah,
Love that.
let's hear from people what they want to be more and less as well.
So, well, thank you for everyone who's sharing. So, we're getting some already. More accepting, less judgmental, less sweating the small stuff. And I love it goes back to what you said at the beginning, Frederik. These are things you can control. It's not the things that you accomplish, it's how you show up and how you want to be. And you can control that. Yeah. So this was an expansive empathy exercise. The big idea was let's empathize with our future selves in order to influence our present state of being. I'm going to keep us moving just because we have two more mind states we want to explore. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. The next mind state is perpetual experimentation. And at IDEO, we love experiments. In your book, Frederik, you talk about perpetual experimentation. And this is the idea that's the practice of constant small experiments to redefine actions and ideas. So why is this important to a future ready mind state?
Yes, it's important to create a better future for yourself, right? And I want to go back to that notion that the future isn't something predicted, it's something to be created step by step. And the step by step is about perpetual experimentation, right? Because it's about doing small and frequent tests rather than waiting for the perfect plan, right? And experiments aren't about failing or succeeding, but about finding what's possible. And for me, every experiment moves you toward the unknown, and each step brings more clarity that allows you to move forward with purpose. And so, even when you experiment just for the sake of a fresh perspective, you expand your ability to see the world from a different angle. And I think that's very important. And each time you do this, you open yourself a little more to the potential for innovation and something better. So, for me, again, like the perpetual experimentation fuels that immediate discovery, right? It
Mm.
tests ideas rapidly and repeatedly and keeps us progressing towards what we actually want to see happening. And most of us, we're looking for that big, epic
Yeah.
epiphany, right? We're looking for that big reveal. But it's more important to look for for a lot of these smaller insights, these little insights that lead to new ideas, right? In every experiment, you can look for those.
I love that too, because, and you're right. Too often, I think we set goals that are too audacious or we feel they have to be really rigid. So you're inviting us to take just the smallest micro experiments. And in fact, so that's the activity we're going to do next. And we're going to encourage everyone to think of a 3-day micro experiment. Just one small thing you can play with to to unlock or just kind of open up some of your mind state over these coming days. So, Frederik, what is guide us through this? Like, what is the way? How would you set up a 3-day micro experiment? And maybe give us an example.
Yes, it's very important not to overthink or waiting for the perfect conditions, right?
Okay.
That's the two things we usually like to do. It's to overthink, right? Or to
Yep.
wait until the perfect conditions are here. Um, and for like a 3-day experiment or micro experiment, right? We can look at maybe three areas, right? Maybe in relationship to your health or your relationships or work. And for health, try a new morning routine, like starting your day with maybe a cold shower, or a cold bath. That's, I think, a trend that a lot of people are exploring at the moment. Or maybe going for a 10-minute walk, right, outside. For relationships, maybe send a gratitude text each morning before you actually do anything else on your phone to someone you care about and see how it impacts your connections, right? I think that's a shift that we can all do, starting tomorrow morning. Or for work, maybe block 1 hour of uninterrupted focus time to tackle a challenging task, right? The first thing in the morning. Um, it's important to keep it simple and specific, right? Something manageable within your schedule. And then at the end, just reflect on what you notice. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, maybe take notice of how does this make me feel, right? Is it helping me in any way? Um, Maybe what response did I get from the people I send a kind message to, right? Or what
Mhm.
surprised you? Those are insights that really are key to maybe refining your approach. So it's very important, again, to not overthink and don't wait for the perfect conditions. As I hear from so many people going back to the ice bath, where they say like, oh, I don't have any ice baths at home, or, I cannot fit that into my morning because I have other things to do, right? Or I'll wait for the weather to improve so it's actually warm outside, right? Things that are just hindering you to get started, right? Instead of
That's
say to yourself, hey, I can turn my shower actually on cold and I don't have to wait until the weather is warmer outside. I can do that inside. So it's just a way of getting started. And for me, one of the micro experiments I'm trying at the moment, and you can check with my daughter, it's actually happening. It's 3 things in the evening that we observed, right, that made us
Mm.
happy, and an additional one thing that we're not so happy about, right? So
Yeah.
just kind of like trying to reflect back on the day and say like, hey, what are these things that make us happy? And what are the things that also make us not happy, right? And maybe we can use that to learn something for our next day. And it's a wonderful reminder. And my daughter always comes up to me and helps me to do that again, like because you have so many excuses why to not do those micro experiments. And having someone else help you with that is a great way to
it
to
is.
to get started.
Just to reiterate, two things you said was one, don't overthink it, and two, reflect on how it makes you feel. I thought that was interesting. It's not, again, it's not what you're trying to accomplish with these micro experiments, but it's how you feel and what you learn through it. I encourage everyone, think of what you might do for your 3-day micro experiment. Something related to, it might be your health, a relationship, something related to work. Pick it small. And if you're up for sharing, we'd love for people to share. I do want to read one comment from Colleen. I experimented with my purpose and it started so small and now it's global. And so it's become part of her, like it can start small. I am going to keep us moving because we have one more mind state we'd like to cover. And this one is very exciting. It's very personal. It's called the idea is Dimension X. So, Frederik, in your book, you talk about Dimension X as the superpower or the thing that makes you uniquely you, especially in moments of challenge. So can you tell us a little bit about what is this Dimension X and why is it important for future ready mind states?
Yes. So when I wrote the book, I put out these 5 dimensions that, we touched on 2 now. And I felt that there's something missing, right? There's something missing. And um, I also felt like, when you write a book about the future, right, you have to include a dimension X because it's just that intriguing piece that is the unknown, right? And for me, the
Mhm.
unknown is people's unique superpower. It's that intrinsic strength that really shapes your contribution to the world and makes you stand out. And we all have that. But
Yeah.
understanding and leveraging your personal strengths helps navigate an uncertain future, right? So leveraging your Dimension X helps you navigate challenges and really contribute meaningfully. So what I wanted to do is really help people to identify first, what is my unique superpower? And there's a couple of ways you can do that, right? You can do that by doing a reflection exercise. You can do that by going through something which is mapping your past life and looking at the highs and lows in your life, these milestones that really shaped you in a way, and how you overcame these. So there's also a way where you can ask other people, literally your friends, and say like, hey, why are you my friend? And checking in with them saying, what's the unique thing about me, right? That you value. That might also lead to discovering your unique superpower. So there's a couple of ways of actually doing that. Most importantly, what I want people to do is not just discover it, but make use of it.
Mm.
Really use that superpower in everything you're doing, because that really helps you to make progress, to move forward, and become the person you want to become.
So to make this tangible, you've given us a couple ways that we can think about it to identify it. I want people to imagine you were going to make a t-shirt that had your superpower motto on it. What would that t-shirt say? And of course, Frederik, I have to ask you, what would yours say? And do you have an example of in your book, you share 14 different stories from colleagues and who talk about their Dimension X. So I'd love to know what would yours say, and can you share a story of a colleague of yours?
Yes. So I've been on that discovery for quite some time, discovery journey for quite some time, obviously, to really discover like what is my unique superpower that I feel can really help me to move forward and make progress. So what I discovered, and to be honest, it changes over time, right? So there could
Yeah.
be something that, for the past 10 years has been true, but for the last, 2, 3 months, it could have changed. So for me, what I've observed throughout my life is a bias towards action, right?
Mm,
That really allowed me to just go for it, right? And just do it without overthinking and without mostly asking for permission, to be honest, as
mm,
well, right? That really
hmm.
served me well. And that's a superpower that I use in most of my work, to just have that bias towards action and see like, what's the first
Yeah.
step I can take here? And just let's go. Um,
Yep.
and so that would probably be on my t-shirt. Um, there is a great sign at the D school as well in the atrium, which says the only way to do it is to do it, right? Which I think is a great reminder that, hey, let's get started, right? And
Yeah.
not overthink it or make the big plan first. So maybe two people I want to highlight. Um, I think all of the stories in the book about these incredible human beings that I call future readies, because they really embrace these dimensions of optimism and openness and curiosity and empathy and experimentation. Um, one is Sarah, that I've been able to work with for quite some time. She lives in Singapore, and she went through a whirlwind of change, right? I think she changed jobs 12 times inside Google, right? Because of reorgs, because of other things, projects winding down, shifting roles, projects shutting down, and so forth. Um, that really, um, was not uh, serving her well, right? And I think she had a health crisis as well that landed her
Mm,
in the hospital, right? So in that chaos, she realized she wasn't listening to what her body and mind truly needed.
mm,
So by tuning into herself and really started to listen to herself and embracing openness and curiosity, she found strength in uncertainty and learn to
mm,
see unexpected turns as opportunities for growth. So now, when something changes in terms of your job or new responsibilities, she sees that as a great opportunity to learn, right? So she
mm,
reframed that as something that just happens to her, where she says like, "Oh, this is another change in my role or in my job or in my work." She now sees that as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to learn. And that small shift in how you approach that really gave her energy, and she's now thriving in what she's
mm.
doing, and she's incredibly successful. So that's Sarah. Another one is Newton, a friend of mine, who really his life took a transformative turn when he asked himself the question, what would I do if I didn't care what others thought?
Mhm.
Right.
It's a good question.
And so this question really sparked a journey of discovery, leading him to become a world champion in powerlifting, actually, and transition from engineering. He had an engineering role into a role at Google that focuses on well-being and mental health. As he went through a mental health crisis himself and suffered from burnout, he really embraced curiosity. And what he said, he was riding the wave of curiosity and
Mhm.
letting go of control and letting go of what other people thought of him, right? To really um, finding a path of purpose and strength and leadership that really inspires now others to care for themselves and to
Mhm.
um, now he starts a movement around mental health and really inspires a lot of people by sharing his story and what he learned throughout these years by literally asking himself that question, what would I do if I didn't care what others thought?
Mhm.
So really two incredible human beings. And there's more of these stories in the book that really showed how focusing on yourself and focusing on what you can control by making a shift in your perspective really unleashes something new.
Yeah. So we went through this last portion somewhat quickly, Dimension X, in terms of how to do it. In your book, there's a lot of robust, the key activity that you encourage folks to do is to map a timeline of key events in your life, in your career, and look for what was the unique way that you address that challenge or what you learned through it. And that's one way to identify your Dimension X. And so I encourage everyone to do that. And if you are comfortable, the light activity today was to just share in the chat, what would that Dimension X t-shirt motto be? But given all that, we are wrapping up. We're going to do a couple questions, but I just want to recap where we've been so far. So again, we are talking with Frederik Pferdt about his new book, and we've covered three states, three dimensions to encourage a future-ready mind state. So the first one was expansive empathy. The big idea here is extending empathy not just to others, but to your future self. And doing so encourages present day actions that can help move you towards your long term goals of how you want to be in the future. We talked about perpetual experimentation, and this idea is lots of like shifting your focus towards rapid goals and adaptive progress. And we talked about doing a 3-day micro experiment. The big idea is to test ideas rapidly and learn. You're not looking for epic epiphanies. You're not looking to overthink it, just to get little insights. Um, and the third one we just talked about was Dimension X. The big idea is this is your unique superpower, the intrinsic strength that shapes how you show up in the world and how you contribute. And it's really important for navigating uncertainty, such as in the future. So with that, let's move to some questions, Frederik. And I do have a couple. And the first one you're going to love. Everyone wants to know, is your background real? So for those of you who are audio only, Frederik is in what looks to be a geodesic dome with a beautiful tree line behind it and plants and a wonderful seating area. So is that real?
It is real, yes. And I think it brings that notion to life that the future is not something that happens to you, it's something you make happen, right? And we've built this geodesic dome with a couple of friends. We all hadn't have a clue on how to build those things, but we took 3 days. Maybe that's a micro experiment here too, to erect a geodesic dome. It was raining. It was December 1st, I remember, and it was right 3 months before the pandemic. And so imagine like when the pandemic then started 2020, March 16th, everybody asked me like, hey, Frederik, did you know that we all need home offices and like spaces to work from home? And I said, like, nobody can predict the future, but you can create your future and shape your future. So I've always wanted to have such a a space for my kids and for myself and for our family and friends, and we named it a Friends Dome. But 2 years in the pandemic, nobody stayed over, obviously here. So we used it as a schoolhouse. We use it as a meditation space. We use it to grow some plants and so forth. And it's real. And I think it's just a reminder to everyone that you can literally shape, your environment. You can build it with friends. And it's not about predicting the future. It's really about making these things happen.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the next one comes from Adam, and this suits you well. So, Frederik, given your experience in fostering creativity and innovation, what do you see as the next big shift in how individuals and organizations prepare for the future?
Um, yes, there's a couple of things. I think for me, when I started at Google and trying to understand how Google innovates, right? I went on a trip to visit 27 offices in less than 12 months and talked to a lot of people and observed kind of like how do people come up with these ideas, right? That have the possibility to change the world. Is it like something in the air, right? They're breathing. Is it like they have a lot of resources at their hand? Or is it like a specific framework or process they're following? Or is it the environment they're in? None of that was true. What I found is that they had a specific future-oriented outlook, which I call that future-ready mind state. And what I see now organizations doing, and a lot of people around the world as well, is moving away from thinking about innovation in terms of investments and in terms of like, I just need a big budget
Uh,
to make ideas work. And instead of focusing on your inner self, focusing on
hmm,
how do ideas actually come into our minds? How do we
hmm,
actually make ideas happen? What are some things that we need
hmm,
as human beings to really also prepare ourselves for the future, for that uncertainty, right? And there's a lot of things that we talked about today that people can do and practice. And for me, that is really inspiring because now we are moving the future out of the hands of people who predict the future, right? And say like, this is going to happen or this should happen towards the people's hands and minds and saying like, which future should
hmm,
actually happen. And
hmm,
I think I want to give that power and control into every single person's mind, hand, and heart to really allow better futures to happen.
hmm. That's wonderful. And Frederik, even though today we focus very much about your book as it relates to individuals, but throughout the book, it is geared towards also leaders and organizations. There's a lot of strategies for both to apply to your personal life in being future ready and at the organizational level. So lots there on that. I appreciated how many activities and tactical ways you can approach that. So we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to have to wrap us up. This one comes from MG. Any tips to deal with the inner voice that sabotages all the good ideas about how to build our future? Frederick, you're nodding and smiling. You're like, oh, I understand this.
Yes, yes, we
Help
all
us
have that
out.
voice. We
Hmm.
all have that voice, and it shows up in in a lot of different ways, right?
Hmm.
It's a voice that really wants to protect us as well, right? To get going, right? Because our mind wants to protect us. So what we see is something that's happening is a negativity bias that we're focusing on the negative first, right? Or the things that are hindering us or that our mistakes or whatever it is. And that's based on our evolution as we needed to think that way. And I think that negativity bias can be overcome, right? By focusing on the positives and focusing on the things that actually make us move forward. So the inner voice is showing up in so many different ways. For me, most importantly, is becoming aware that this is an inner voice that you don't have to listen to. Um, I know you're smiling as well, Chloe. And sometimes we think that inner voice has the truth. It's not.
Hmm.
It's just a voice that wants to protect you. It wants to talk to you. So becoming aware of that voice is super important. And then your actions don't have to follow that voice, right? Not everything that your voice tells you, you need to actually do, right? It's mostly the opposite that you should do, right? So when your voice tells you like you should be angry at someone, right? It's not something you should actually do. Try a different approach. Say like, okay, now I actually show up with empathy or I show up
Hmm.
with kindness and see what that changes. And most of
Hmm.
the time, it's very powerful.
Hmm. I love that. Frederik, it is such a delight to have you. Your creativity, your humanity, it shows up in everything you do. So I am going to start to wrap us up. I do have one last question for you, Frederik. I usually like to wrap with asking guests if they had advice for their younger self. It's appropriate today that I ask you, what advice would you give to your future self? While you think on that, I'm going to wrap us up. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Today, we've been hearing from Frederik Pferdt, Google's first chief innovation evangelist and author of the best-selling book, What's Next is Now, How to Live Future Ready. It is available at your favorite bookseller. And if you want to dive deeper into things like a unique superpower, I encourage you to check out IDEOU's course, From Superpowers to Great Teams. It's a self-paced course, and there's a bunch of resources also at our website, IDEOU.com. And with that, Frederik, final advice for your future self?
Yes, thanks for the shout out for the book. As we have probably a lot of people who love design here on this call, I just want to actually show the cover because it tells you three things. The first one is that
For
you
those,
see
if you're not visual right now, so it's a white cover, but it has a holographic. Well, you
mirror.
describe it. It has a
Yes,
thank you. Yes.
a
Mm-hmm.
holographic mirror, absolutely. And so it's just a reminder that the future is not shaped by someone else, it's shaped by you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
looking into that mirror, you see a blurry image of yourself. So that's a constant reminder that, hey, it's you that shapes the future. The second one is if you shift it around, so people not seeing that, but listening, it changes colors. There's a kaleidoscope of colors appearing as soon as you actually shift your perspective. And that's a good reminder, like we can shift our perspective, right? We can look at things differently from different angles. And the third one, it's a shape, right? So the future is not a round, clean, even square shape, right? It's a very individual shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your future looks very different to other people's future. And I think that's a good thing. We all should thrive for making better futures happen. And when you ask me that question about my future self, what would I tell my future self? Um, as we focused a lot on individuals today, and I think, you should definitely start with your own future, right? And not, help others first to invent their futures, right? Start thinking about like, how do you want to be in the future? There's also a good reminder that connections are the bridges that turn individual dreams into shared realities. So reminding us that the future is best built together. So let's take that seriously and let's build better futures together. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Frederik. And thank you everyone for joining. That's it for us. Bye.